Okay, so I think that we can try to start and just to introduce this webinar. And so thank you. Good afternoon to everybody, to the participants, and to the panelists. I am Stefania Romenti, and as some of you know, I am the president of EUPRERA, the association that is dedicated to the educational research in the field of public relations. We started this initiative, this new initiative this year that is called EUPRERAtalks. So just some meetings with our members in order to share the results of some researches and to discuss about some key topics for the profession and for the academic researches. So this webinar is linked to a EUPRERA project. The EUPRERA project is about what communication professionals really do. I want to leave the floor to the panelists and to share with our participants the first results of your international research. So thank you so much, and please, I leave you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Romenti, for this wonderful opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my name is Piet Hein Coebergh. I am a professor in public relations and transparency at Leiden at the University of Applied Science. And I have the great honor, together with a couple of my colleagues, and whom I will introduce in a couple of seconds, to present to you our international research projects on what on earth communication professionals do. And I know that we have a hidden colleague at EUPRERA who is helping me and us to share the slides, and I expect the slides to come up in a couple of seconds. What we have prepared for you, and here's the screen sharing starting, here we go. What we have prepared to you is 18 slides. First part with some general outline, and the second part is with what we think interesting statistics, commenting on what the title says, what communication professionals do. You are all, and as I am, and as we are all in this webinar, we are into communication or public relations or strategic communication. It has or corporate communication. The strange thing is that if we want to define communication, and if we want to define communication management and what communication professionals do, we find it very difficult to find one definition to agree on that. And at the same time, I think we all can agree that the communication profession is important in this world, in this society, where digitization and globalization keeps on growing, where communication matters so much in trying to understand each other. So communication professionals play a vital role, and therefore we think it's important to understand what they do, how we can measure that. So that's how we started this project already in 2017. I started it with my colleague Martien Schriemer, and he will take also part in this presentation, and with Wim Elving of Groningen in the Netherlands at the Hanse Hogeschool, who is a professor in sustainable communication over there. And we started to interview people. What do you think that a good definition could be? What do you think that a right theory could be? Because if we want to understand something, we normally use theory, academic theory. And we were actually surprised that in measuring the work of communication professionals, in most of the times, people ask for the business card. If it says, well, you do communication, we say it's a communication professional. And then we ask people, what shall a communication professional do? What is excellence? When are you happy? So there is some research already done, but not so much on the actual work. In a definition, we think that could be helpful. Now, on the next slide, I'm very happy to introduce the colleagues who are today here available to discuss this research. You've seen my picture already from Leiden. Then we also have in our panel Dr. Anca Anton from the Bucharest University from Romania, also participating in this project. Professor Marc Pujol from Barcelona, Catalunya in Spain, also participating. They can both share a bit of their experience, how they worked with this research, with the survey, with the questionnaire, with their students and professionals, because that's one of the key characteristics of this project, is that we combine students, we connect students with professionals and have them working on a definition in our survey on what communication professionals do, and create a better understanding between students and professionals and us researchers and what we are doing. Now, on the next slide, you get an impression on the field we are working in. And this is just a selection only. If we are discussing communication, some people include advertising, others do public affairs, journalism even. That's a delicate one, I know that. We can have a big discussion, maybe not today, but some other time. Of course, social media, investor relations, corporate media, etc. Now, in our mind, all these people work on communication, because how we define communication, that's managing a flow of information from the organization or between the organization and stakeholders, the public, in one way. And in most cases, try to have a conversation, try to have a dialogue, but in very different ways. So this is just an example. We want to understand all these disciplines, all these communication disciplines. We want to understand them better, but how can we do that? Now, on the next slide, you will see the model, the famous model that I think everybody of you knows, that we selected as actually a beautiful model to analyze communication. We know already that Shannon and Weaver in the late 40s created the model with source and receiver. As you also know, the model then was created for machines, but David Berlow in 1960, he reshaped that famous model, sender, receiver or source receiver, with a message and a channel for humans. And he added, as you also will see, typical human elements like seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, the skills, the attitudes, which makes it way more complex than for machines, but also very interesting. Now, this model has several advantages to use for the analysis of communication management. Everybody respects and understands it. It's well respected and tested, but it also allows for what we call an anatomical analysis. It's now possible, if we look at source, message, channel, receiver in detail, to ask of communication professionals, how do you manage source, message, channel, receiver? And we have some interesting statistics on that that we will discuss later in this presentation. So this model we have selected, and we have translated this model into a questionnaire that is now available in 7 languages online. We have been using the last couple of years with an increasing number of participating countries and universities, which is wonderful. And this whole presentation today is also about sharing that approach that we are taking, sharing the first results, and hopefully inviting, or at least interest many of you in joining us and exchange information on the same structured way that we are now analyzing communication professionals. And just one more thing on communication professionals, everybody's communicating, of course, like the prime minister or the general or the nurse, everybody, but only a few people are paid, that's why they're a professional, to manage this flow of information. So it also helps to distinguish communication professionals from all other people that are communicating and have a better understanding of the profession that we are researching and that we are also training our students for. Now, on the next slide, you will see now a rough picture of all participating institutions, even in Latin America. We worked with Suriname, with the local trade organization for communication professionals. We did some research there, very interesting. We also, since a couple of months now, are very happy to have new friends in Asia, in Georgia, at the University of Georgia in Tbilisi. I had the great honor and privilege of visiting there a couple of weeks ago. They are translating the whole questionnaire now in Georgian. I see also that our friend professor from the University of Warsaw is in the audience, I think, today. So I'd be interested in hearing the latest results also there. Now it's almost, I believe, 9 countries now and something like 12 universities who are participating. to me, the good news is we want to speak the same language. We are all interested in sharing the same information, doing this in a practical way with students and professionals, but also developing the same language, the same analysis, and we will have some interesting statistics later to try to better understand what we are all doing. My personal expectation and first results also is it looks a lot, it's quite the same what we are doing. The first analysis of comparisons between the Netherlands, Suriname, Latin America, and Belgium, for instance, they are already participating for a couple of years, is that we have a lot of similarities. Now, this can start a very interesting debate on standardizing what we define as public relations, corporate communication, etc. Now, on the next slide, I will discuss this briefly. These are the characteristics of our research. This is what we think makes our project, our approach different. First of all, we use academic theory. We use David Berlow's theory to analyze what communication professionals do. We do not look at the business card. We don't care so much if somebody says, no, I'm in marketing. No, I'm in social media. No, I'm in events. We only want to know, are you managing at least 12 hours in a week? So not just a couple of minutes, but it's at least 12 hours in a week. Are you managing the flow of information from a sender to a receiver? Second characteristic, density. We want to collect a lot of data. We now have in the database, I believe, 2,500 filled in questionnaires, and an interview with a questionnaire takes about, 30 to 40 minutes. So it's a serious thing, but it creates a lot of data, which allows us for serious analysis. Now, my friend Martien Schriemer, who will tell you some more on the statistics, still keeps telling me we need more data. Of course, we need more data. So please, everybody join in. The more we have, the better. But already, if we compare our research to lots of other research on communication, we are building a huge and impressive kind of database. So that helps. The density helps. Third, open source. We want to share all our information. All participating countries already can get a copy of the latest version of the database with all the data, anonymous, of course. They can get it in their email and do their own analysis. We will do analysis as well, of course. And what we hope to do, maybe later this year or next year, is to put the database online for everybody to make their own analysis. So to share as much and to build as much knowledge together as well, open source. The fourth thing I discussed already a little bit, connecting students and professionals. As we know, EUPRERA is also very much about education. So I think therefore it's very nice to work closely together with EUPRERA with this whole idea of connecting students and professionals. Participating professors in the panel today, also from Romania and from Spain, will confirm that how their students try to connect with professionals, try to build the interviews, and how they learn from each other and build also a network, which is good for everybody involved. So that's, I think, an interesting element of this whole research. And the final thing is, excuse me, we do it multi-year. So we started in 2018, officially launching questionnaire. We keep on building the database so that we can compare countries, industries, disciplines, but also developments through time. We do it in 7 languages. We expect 2 languages soon, again, Georgian and Polish. But it's the same survey. We have 3 open questions at the end of the survey. We ask professionals, what do you think are the 3 main trends, developments in your profession? And some students can add maybe another personal question if they have to do a specific task or research. So we have some flexibility for open questions, but we do want to have this quantifiable, quantitative, standard, validated survey to add up and to compare. So on the next slide, you see the screenshot of the EUPRERA page. If you want to know more on this, and if you want to contribute in one of the language you see on the right-hand side, you get directly access to the survey in your preferred language, and you can fill it in if you, for yourself, want to fill it in. Now, technically, professors are not communication professionals. We teach about it and we do research on it, but most of us are not managing an information flow for an organization. But of course, you can have a look at the survey You can check it. You can do it together with a communication professional. We can send you, of course, the questionnaire if you are interested. But this is helpful to get more information on where we are on the project and to get access to all the languages and questionnaires. And on the next slide, you have a screenshot of a LinkedIn group we started called Communication Research. I invite everybody, if you are not already in it, to join, because here we share the latest news on our research, and we have each other's address, of course, if we want to have personal contact, so we can create a community together, which is also one of the nice things I think and I experience in this research. And on the next slide, this is the page where it gets interesting for those of you who like numbers. And for numbers, I especially am very happy to work with Martien Schriemer. I already know Martien for 10 years. We were colleagues at the University of Applied Science in Leiden. 2 years ago, he shifted to another team, and he's now working at the University of Applied Science in Haarlem, also the Netherlands. Together, we were at the start working on this whole project. So not only we know each other, I think quite well, but we know also the project very well. And we work together on creating a match with practice, and which is more my focus. And Martien makes sure that the numbers we are creating are interesting and are valid and hopefully also understandable. And maybe here, Martien, just one final word. What we also try to do in quantifying communication professionals is at least it allows us to count how many communication professionals are working in a certain country. And I think Martien can now explain to you how we calculated the total number and also the percentage of communication professionals, in this case in the Netherlands, because in the Netherlands we already had the most data to do this calculation. Is that okay, Martien?
Yes, that's quite fine. Okay, thank you, Piet Hein. Well, before we dive into these numbers, please excuse my terrible English. I hope I can make myself understandable. Before we dive in, just the questionnaire has 3 basic sections. The first section is about the function of the respondent. The second is about the sector he is working in and the organization he's working for. And the third part is, well, how he or she, of course, is managing the information flow, like sender, message, channel, and receiver. All these parts are necessary to create this estimate. First, we always had a thought that the type of industry someone is working for would be significantly different for how someone is working in a communication field. Someone in the industry would be something else than someone in the administrative and support service or in the human health and social work activities. So we have to make sure we can view these numbers within a certain sector of industry. So that's one of the questions we need. The other question we needed was, do you have an estimate of how many colleagues you consider are a communication professional within your organization? Of course, we have a database, and in this database, not all sectors are fully, have a large number of respondents. So we have to select only NAS industries with more than 30 respondents. We want to compare this, of course, with the population. So let's see, let's have manufacturing, and we have enough respondents, but we have to post-stratification scale down because we had too much in comparison with the total population. So that's why the estimate is 19. With the same scaling factor, the weighting factor, we scale down the labor force, and then we have a perfect alignment to make an estimate how many communication professionals there would be in this industry. Bear in mind, this is in comparison with the total population. So the total population of these NAS industries are distributed a certain way, and the same distribution we map on the sampling. Okay, so for the Netherlands, we had enough respondents to make for these industries a estimate. So the total estimate is 1.4% of the working population will be a communication professional, which was somehow, well, in line with your thoughts, wasn't it, Piet Hein?
It was. I had to unmute myself, yes. And especially in terms of percentage, I think that's intriguing because the rough numbers already the last couple of years showed, and also if we looked at individual organizations, and we have now a total here of 1.4% of the total labor force working population. I would not be surprised if this percentage is comparable in other countries as well. And I think that is interesting because at least in the Netherlands, a lot of journalists, for instance, have an opinion of communication professionals. They say they're only interested in reputation and they're lying to journalists and they're a very powerful force. I'm not so sure about that, but it's at least helpful that we know how many people we are talking about. And if this is a true percentage, and we are testing that increasingly with our database, it might be interesting to know as a profession that, let's say that the percentage of communication professionals on average in every country, in every industry is around, now, between 1 or 2%. I think that's an interesting percentage to understand because that's apparently the total quantity we're talking about. And then, of course, we can dive in what they are doing. So I think this is already a good start to quantify our total communication population.
Yes, yeah. Well, and you can see, of course, there are quite some differences between the sectors. You see the information and communication. That's where the marketing agencies are, and the communication agencies. Well, they have the most, 4.9% of the people, and we have arts and entertainment and recreation, we have 5.9%. So that these sectors have the most communication professionals compared to, well, let's say manufacturing, only 0.4%. Okay, so I'm very curious for the future how this will compare to other countries, right? Shall we go to the next slide? As I said, in one of the parts of the questionnaire considers the managing of the flow of information from sender, medium, channel, and receiver. We ask the respondents, well, are you making these choices in this management of information flow? And are you making choices concerning the sender, concerning the medium, concerning channel, etc.? So if, well, you can, of course, think that if someone is never managing the sender or medium, how can someone be a communication professional? Well, we say, then you are not. But we ask these questions, and we wanted to compare this with between the countries to have an understanding if there are some large differences or not differences. Well, you can see that the chi-square testing leads to of course, a significant difference, but that's one part of the story. Understanding how these differences come about, it's the main question. Well, we know, of course, Suriname has not so much respondents, but Belgium and Spain and the Netherlands have. And now, I think that the main difference between these countries is due to sampling. Maybe I can ask Marc Pujol if he can comment some on the Spain statistics, because we had a short discussion before, and I think he said that they were targeting more directors and managers. Wasn't this the case, Marc?
Yes, in fact, I wanted to explain a bit later when it was my turn, but it was something related to the sample that we used and the databases that students were looking at. So yes, we had more a bigger percentage of managers, and the results were a little bit affected this semester. But we hope to continue this project in the coming years. So probably we will do some changes in this.
Yes, and I think that over time and with more data per country, I suspect, I'm of course not sure, but I suspect that these differences will even out, that they will become more or less similar. But as it stands now, we have differences. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is, let me explain a bit how we came about to the Berlo score, as we named it. We have these questions on the previous slide, and we have these questions concerning the way you manage the information flow from sender, medium, channel, and receiver. You score yourself with never, sometimes, often, of always. So you can get a maximum score, and then you have a lot of, let's say, decision-making power, and that's maximum is 81. So by dividing this score, we get a number between 0 and 1. Let's go to the next slide. Now here we measured the decision-making power by juniors, media, seniors, and management. This is a 95 confidence interval around a average. And here we have significant differences between junior and the rest. And there's a significant difference between media and management. Not senior, but with media and management. This makes a bit sense, because seniors should have more decision-making power than juniors. So we think this, with this Berlo score, we can measure some effect of the management, communication management. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And the following slides will give you an insight into the data collection as it stands now. And here you have some of the countries and the first and the last date of respondents. So just to give you an insight, and now we have more than 3,000 respondents. Okay, let's go to the next slide. One of the questions we ask about the function of the respondent is, well, are you accountable for what? For what aspect of communication are you accountable? Now, if you see at the right hand of your screen, the bold-faced totals, there's the top 3. And now you see that there are not very much, no large differences between the countries. Of course, it will alter a bit, but you see that the reputation and image, brand, corporate, and recognition, awareness, and social media is well accounted for by every country. And of course, there are some differences, but please bear in mind that, for instance, France and Portugal are still at the start of the data collection process. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Yes, and here we have a bit the same. At the right-hand side of your screen, you see the bold-faced totals, the top 3, and the top 3 are the expertise of the respondents is social media, internal communication, corporate communication. These are the top 3, and you can see, well, maybe the top 5 is the same for every country. So now we are gathering a picture from what does a communication professional do? Well, as it stands now, the expertise and the things these communication professionals do are not very different between countries. So that's for instance, a first insight. Of course, there are some differences, right? Let's go to the next slide. And here we just an insight into the data collection progress. We asked the respondent, well, how many FTEs does your organization have? We needed that number to get an estimate. And just to make sure, all these countries are, of course, still, as we are still gathering all kinds of data. And you see that, the majority of the data is, well, the smaller organizations. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And here we ask, and this is also very important to our Berlo score, how many colleagues do you have to create an estimate of the total communication professionals within a region. And here you see that the most data gathered are between 2 and 50 colleagues who are a communication professional. Still, early days, okay, not so for the Netherlands perhaps, but for other countries, we have to gather more and more data to get a more solid view of what a communication professional actually does, right? I think this is the last, yes, and now we had a lot of insight and we have, of course, more and more data and more analysis to do, but this is the start and the first. Piet Hein,
yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Martien. And I think we can now put away the slides and try to have a bit more camera. Yes, I see already at least our dear colleagues. Marc already had a brief comment on the data collection in Spain. And maybe now, Anca, you would be so kind to tell a little bit what your experience is in Romania, how this all worked out. What did you find nice? What did you find difficult? What would be your advice in continuing? So your experience, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Piet. Hein. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be part of this panel and of this research. It's so nice to see it grow and expand in so many countries. The comparative possibilities are incredible. I'm really looking forward to getting more data, as Martien was saying. So one of the major challenges of the research is and has been up until now putting students in contact with the profession and with the industry. And this has been, let's say, bittersweet to some extent. We've had, as Piet Hein said, we had some ups and downs. First of all, I think it was a very interesting and out-of-the-box experience for the students. A lot of them, for example, had their first contact with LinkedIn, and so the research, to some extent, acted as a springboard into their professional life. And on the other hand, for example, we did see in I think a little bit more cases than I would have liked, a little bit of let's say withdrawal from or maybe withdrawal is not the best term to use, but the availability of professionals was not always as we would have liked it. Either in terms of time or, for example, in terms of the complexity of the answers they gave to students when they were talking about trends or recommendations. However, we did manage to get a large number of answers, and I do commend my students for that. They pulled through, and I did get a lot of very positive feedback on the experience. And for some of them, it was almost first interactions with the industry. And it was an interesting way to approach it, because I teach both in a communication school and in a business school. So I worked with both types of students, and I organized them into waves. And during the first wave, in addition to the interview, they asked for recommendations. So right now I'm in the middle of comparing recommendations that business students got and communication students got. And in the second wave, I instructed them to ask questions, to ask two questions each. I didn't tell them what questions. So because we are now finishing the second wave, I'm looking forward to see what the communication students asked and what the business students asked. So I think we can bring several new layers to the research and see exactly what comes out of it. And in terms of data, of course, we are not as advanced as the Netherlands. I think I only have about 350 at this point in Romania, but I do hope that we will have a lot more coming in the coming years. But one thing that, or two things that came out of the data at this point was, one, people are working a lot. So 76% of the respondents said that they are working more, way more over the 38 hours, or in Romania, it's the 40 hours work week, which is a lot, and the other thing is something related to journalists at management level. Now, in the research, we do have this discussion, and I've had a discussion with Piet throughout the last year about well, exactly where communication professionals stand regarding journalists, and I've been focusing more on communication professionals. But we did question, and we did ask journalists, and something that came out was that, particularly at managerial level, more and more journalists are doubling or are developing, in addition to their editorial concerns, are developing a second stream of activities that are very much in line with what communication professionals do. So they are tending to the reputation, to the notoriety, to the brand awareness. They are doing social media. So they are developing two flows of action. One that is traditionally journalistic, so they are tending to their editorial policy, and the other one is basically they are acting as a communication manager. So of course, more information can come out of the data, but this is, you know, the first things that I've managed to see coming out of the data. In September, I think the second wave will finish, and I'll be able to go more into the data.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anca. Maybe just one follow-up question now, because like we are just showing all these data from all these countries, one thing that strikes me again and again, we see a lot of similarities between the countries. Of course, we always say, well, countries differ from each other, cultures differ from each other, but my impression based on the data is that the work is quite the same. Do you recognize that? Do you also feel that what communication professionals are doing in Romania is in essence the same as in Holland and Spain, etc.?
This actually is linked to something that I wrote down, but I decided not to say because of time. But because of your question, I will say it. So I think that what we see in Romania, we will see if it's the same in other countries. It's a very strong hybridization of the profession. So because I'm doing several other researches, for example, in comparison with the UK. In UK, when you are talking about public relations, for example, or communication professionals, you know, in this area of public relations, you are talking about public relations. However, when you are looking at, for example, public relations professionals in Romania, you will see people doing integrated communication, doing a lot of other types of communication. So I think the level of hybridization could be something that we could look at in this research, because we have so many countries, and we could maybe identify you know, a national specificity here. I'm not sure how other countries are, but I did see this high level of hybridization in Romania in terms of communication professionals. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Again, to the whole group, if anybody wants to raise her hand or his hand, please do so. So again, I would like to encourage an open discussion, but still also I would like to hear, if you will, Marc, a bit more. You already told us a bit on how you did your sampling and for the moment to focus on more higher level professionals. What is in general your experience with this project in relation to your students, the professionals? How did they react to the survey, and what's your perspective on how it's working?
Okay, well, I will try to be fast. And just to summarize a little bit, I think has been a success in general terms, this experience. We started in March with all my students. And from March to May, we got more than 560 respondents. So I believe it's quite a lot. And well, now I will try to explain a little bit what did it work with students and professionals to get such a big amount of respondents. First of all, I also wanted to highlight that we focused on corporate communication and PR professionals mainly. Yeah, we also get a few advertisers or journalists, but mainly PR and strategic communication professionals, corporate communication. Probably in the future we could open a little bit, as Anca was saying, into other areas of specialization in communication to see this wider picture, but we focus right now in these specializations. And since we only focus on these specializations, we took some subjects from our degree and master degree that were related to these topics. Yeah, so but we could possibly open it to other subjects in the future. So this was a first problem was this. We have an undergraduate degree in Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. It's the Open University in Catalonia, where I teach, that it's online, and the degree, it's called communication. So it's very, very wide. It includes everything there, you know, advertising, audiovisual communication, so cinema, PR, everything in 4 years. And all the subjects focused on PR and corporate communication were placed on the first year. And that's why for participating with these undergraduate students, we had to choose to pick up the first year students. And this was very, very, not difficult, but encouraging for us. It was hard to make them understand, you know, the purpose of this international research. And we found it much easier with master degree students that were more senior, and they understood perfectly what we wanted to achieve with this. So my recommendation would be, if you can choose, try to pick some senior students instead of very young ones. This is my first impression, and because otherwise you need to do a lot of didactics to teach and to make them understand the process and to help them a little bit. That's why also the databases at the end were offered from all the teaching stuff, because they were very lost on finding professionals. So we had to share a few links of official national databases, and maybe that's why at the end the sample was a little biased. And what else? Well, so recommendations for students: give them time enough to do it. We were using different timings for different subjects, and the subject that we gave them less time, just 3 weeks, was too stressful for them. They need more time, because they need answers from professionals. It's probable that maybe for 1-2 weeks they don't get any response from a professional, and then they need to review it, to do the process again, to send new emails or to contact by phone, whatever, to other professionals. So my recommendation is minimum 1.5 months of process, and if you can even give some more time, why not give them some more time? That's also an outcome. Then ask them to be patient. Another recommendation. It's okay if they don't accept. It's like when you try to to find a boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe it's not easy to find it in the first moment. So doesn't matter. Take your time. It's okay. You will end up by having the interviews. But they don't understand, especially the younger ones, that they can be refused. This is quite frustrating for them, but it's makes some psychology at that side. Then what the yeah, let them feel engaged with the research a little bit, give them power, not only sharing the survey, but let them do something else. As Anca was saying before, me too, I added some open questions from students that helped to do more an interview and not just a survey. And this was much more valued by them, I think, and they enjoyed that part. And yeah, also highlight the opportunity to contact with professionals by doing some academic activities. And it could be that in the future they are also potential employers. So why not make a good impression when you try to contact them? That's some recommendations. And then about communication professionals, well, we found, I suppose that in every country is the same, but in Spain, communication professionals are quite tired to participate in surveys and interviews regarding their profession. They like to discuss on their profession, but they participate too often. There are many researchers that share with them some surveys for their papers, and then there are all these big institutions. EUPRERA is one of them, with the European Communication Monitor, but many others in Spain, DIRCOM, ADC. There are many associations that every year, even sometimes more than once a year, they ask them to participate. So they are tired of it. And my recommendation is ask students to ask it in a very polite way, but motivated and with patience. So I think the professionals that see that students really love the profession, and they would love to interview them for a while, just for a few minutes. And it's not just for one research, but it's for their professional careers, or for academic title. Then they feel more, I think, more empathy, and they are more willing to participate. That's a little bit what I found, because sometimes we were discussing why they didn't answer you. And if you read the emails and you see the tone, the style, what they say, then maybe you could understand a little bit why. So this is also an important part. Well, they are very busy people, so please don't spend too much time on this survey and interview. I always recommended them to be fast and maximum 20 minutes. Okay, maybe 30 if they have time, but offer a short time, and then probably they would say yes. If you ask for 1 hour, they won't accept. And this is a little bit what I found. It's just few ideas, maybe unconnected, but and then also I wanted to highlight that also the results were quite similar, as everybody has been saying now. But I found already some differences from Spain and other countries that I believe they are interesting. And I think when all these preliminary results are more studied in detail, we can have even more interesting data. No? But for example, the usage of external communication instruments, I've seen that, at least from the data that we got on this semester, it's very common here to use blogs and podcasts, much more than in other countries. Or in internal communication here in Spain, the face-to-face contact is much more important than in Belgium, the Netherlands, and probably something cultural as well. And I don't know, even after the COVID crisis, this is still a very important way of contact, much more than the email, but it's like usually the most important way of contact, internal communication. But in Spain, internal face-to-face communication, it's much more important. And so just a few ideas that for me were quite surprising. I didn't expect to find this thing, and I'm working here and studying here communication, but this kind of survey allows you to find some, I think, very interesting data that could be discussed and compared with other countries. So I just recommend you please to join this project with us and to make it grow a little bit bigger. So that was my intervention.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marc. Wonderful. Now, I did think that I see in the audience Professor Dr. Anna Jupovic-Ginalska, and maybe if you are there, you can, if you can give some comment. Hello, you are there, coming up, because if you hear all this, and you are almost starting now at the University of Warsaw with this project, I'm curious if you think, oh boy, this is a lot, maybe too much, or yes, I'm quite excited, or something in between. You're still on mute, Anna. I'm not sure if it is possible for you to give some comment on this, if you want. If not, we can skip it, of course, and hopefully meet each other in Vienna, where I hope to meet many of you. I will leave that for a moment and maybe give a general invitation to the whole group of participants. If there's anybody who wants to share a comment or a question on what we are doing, because this is the moment, I would say, again, repeating that hopefully many of us will participate live in Vienna at the EUPRERA Congress in September. And we expect to give then even more details on where we are in the project. But if we can share something now already, that would also be nice. Anybody? I will not do a test. I will not make it very complicated, but this is just an open invitation.
Maybe until people think of a question to ask or a comment, but maybe I can say about something, present something that we are preparing at this point. So we are taking it's more education than research. But what we are doing is we are taking the recommendations that the professionals gave students. So we are talking about somewhere between 300 and 400 entries, and we are translating it into English and transforming it into a project, most likely on Instagram, for students to share with students from all across Europe, or even more, because this is no longer just a European project. So hopefully we will be able to send you the link to this, and you can share it with your students in order to have this input well available to everyone. And here I saw in the audience one of the students that I'm working on on this, and she was telling me that she when she started reading the recommendations, that she feels inspired and she wants to put some of them on her wall, just to have as a permanent inspiration. So I think that this project really does put forward a lot of dimensions and a lot of levels that we can use, both from a research perspective and from a pedagogical perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, I fully agree. Also, one of the things that we have experienced in Holland, actually, and also in Belgium, is, and Marc said it and Anca said it, motivation for both the professionals and the students is, of course, important for the success of this. And well, if you look at the numbers, 500 in Spain and 300 in Romania, it's really a lot. So well done in terms of motivation and discipline. What we do in the Netherlands is for 4 years now, is we completely build it in the final year, the 4th year program of our students. They have a whole semester, which is called the communication professional. They get all sorts of practical courses, which really prepares them for the real work. And doing this interview and finding 4 professionals for each student, we have around 70 graduate final year students every year in Leiden. Kind of helps them to prepare them and to motivate them, but they also have to do it to get their study points. But we experience, and I fully confirm what Marc says and what Anca says, it is important to motivate the students with explaining what we are doing, like we are doing at the moment. So webinars like this, presentations like this, help, because it's not that simple. It really, to understand why this research makes sense, it took us years to really get it at this point that we are now. So we have to keep remembering that for students it's all new, and for many professionals it's new. And I also fully agree with with Marc and saying that, of course, they get other interviews as well from EUPRERA and from other institutions. So yes, we have to motivate students. It's better if they're graduate students, senior students. So indeed, for first-year students, it's probably too complicated. Now, we did this for a couple of years now in the Netherlands. We do this for 2 years now at Artevelde University of Applied Science in Ghent in Belgium, Flanders. Last year, we had a big online seminar in putting together all the Dutch students with the Belgian students together. And it was wonderful to see how they discussed, like we are doing now, the same questions, the same analysis, and then still learning from each other, because of course there are differences between the Netherlands and Belgium. But then you have a same platform, a same language, and then you can indeed fine-tune, oh, this is how you do it, and this is how you define that, and this is why we have these differences. We plan to do that again coming December 21, and then live, because we hope that COVID is not coming back to any of our countries, but also not in the Benelux. So we will implement the plan that we already had for last year. We go by bus from Leiden to Ghent and have a whole day together, Leiden, Ghent in Belgium, to discuss all the results that we have in December coming until that moment. So that's another advantage, I think, not only Vienna, EUPRERA in September, but also Ghent, December, that this whole research allows us to speak the same language, to look indeed for maybe cultural differences, like Marc indicated in maybe the face-to-face approach compared to other approaches. Of course, we've also seen an increase in online instruments during COVID. So these are interesting topics to discuss. And again, also now today, I find it very reassuring that we see that in other countries happening as well. I also realize now that we are almost getting to the 60-minute point in our webinar. So typically for students and teachers, that's a normal moment of reflection to say, is it not time to call it a day? So maybe it's a good moment again to check with all the participants if anybody, it's not obligatory, but this is the moment, if anybody has a question or a comment to share. And of course, if now is not the moment for any kind of questions, please feel free to join our LinkedIn group, to contact me or Martien or Anca or Marc if you have any question on how we can work together on this research. So of course, this is to me only the start of a discussion with many of you, and certainly not a stop. So again, this invitation, if nobody raises her or his hand, then I think it's time for me, and I'm looking also at Marc, Anca, and Martien. Yes, you see a kind of nodding. Maybe it's a beautiful moment to say stop and goodbye. And I'm looking back now at the invisible anchor and boss of EUPRERA, who is, I think, now managing the whole Anne-Maria Grazia, who I want to thank very much for her digital guidance, because she did all the slides and the putting together. I see some goodbyes already, and I don't expect our invisible anchor to show up. So maybe it's for me as your interim chairman for today to thank you all very much, especially my colleagues Anca, Marc, and also Martien, to thank you very much, participants and attendees, for joining us. This is recorded. This will be put online. I will share it in the LinkedIn group, share it with anybody who wants, because especially also from the input of Martien, Marc, and Anton, this is a wonderful information clip and lesson, hopefully for new students and researchers and maybe professionals to join. So thank you for that. I see goodbyes here and there. This is also for me, I think, the same to say goodbye. Thank you all. Thank you so much. See you again, hopefully in Vienna or somewhere else or online. And let's join the research. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.